Settling in ancient lands or designing urban jungles, city builders can be the ultimate survival challenge or creative expression for those who enjoy system building. Hello, my name's GamerZach and welcome to my 30 upcoming PC city building games in 2021 and 2022 list. Now, the city building genre is not as fixed as it once was. We have roguelites, survival elements, and multiplayer on this list. Urban, historical, fantasy, or science fiction. Which one of these worlds would you want to live in? I've spent a lot of time on this, so if you do appreciate what you see here, please do like, subscribe, and share the video with your city building community, as it really does keep this channel live and these videos being made. Also, be sure to vote on your favorite game from the list over at gamerzach.com/listhub. Extra games, bonus behind the scenes, and a Discord community you can join are all there, or follow on Twitter to reach me directly. There are also almost 20 bonus games after the main list, so be sure to watch all the way through. Alright, now let's get started. Laying the first brick, it's NewCity by Lone Pine Games. An urban regional city builder where you build up from a small farm town into a thriving metropolis. Plan your city, follow individuals going about their day, deal with traffic, balance the budget, and handle disasters as you use the creative tools to create a unique but livable city. Urban city builders that are good are few and far between. SimCity monopolized that area for the longest time, and Cities Skylines has had scarce competition since 2015, so there is quite a bit of hope riding on this one. I don't see NewCity unseating any game from their thrones, but having been in early access since 2020, with few but very positive reviews on Steam, this might be an alternative that has a strong niche following. The plan was originally to fully release in 2020, but development had some setbacks, so it's gonna be later now. For another urban alternative, we've got Citystate 2 by Andy Sztark. This is an urban city builder where government and politics play a part in how your city runs and the issues you need to deal with. A sequel to the original Citystate, I was a little let down by the first game, as it felt a bit too simplistic for what it seemed to be promising. Here, you can expect to be growing your city with residential, commercial, and industrial zones, place service buildings, control your immigration policy to expand your population, enact other policies to determine how your city is governed, and claim new lands to have multiple cities within your nation. There's also a nice touch of first-person mode to drive around and admire your creation, or get a closer look at the problems. It is made by a single developer, so expectations should be managed, but this, so far, is looking like a big step up, and it will be interesting to see how Citystate 2 brings the building and political aspects of the gameplay to fruition in 2021, when it's expected to release. And then for something a little bit different, a kind of reverse city builder called Terra Nil by vfqd, elyaradine, and TheJunt. Okay, this is just a tiny little one, but it's a nice concept that some of you might like. It's a city builder that's about restoring the environment and undoing your city. You totally deconstruct your city before leaving nature to exist in isolation, so it is all in about being for nature. It's a relaxing experience, and this clearly isn't a hardcore survival city builder that's been a popular style these few years, but it's nice to have some variety once in a while, and not everything has to be big, not to mention some of these levels here can be pretty hard. Turn a barren wasteland into an ecological paradise, and the pixel art is actually pretty good and often pleasant enough to just sit there and watch the trees swaying and the animals moving around. Updates are regular too, so more features should be on the way. Pay what you want for Terra Nil if you're interested, and have a little bit of a chill time. And now into some survival city builders, starting with Kingdoms Reborn by Earthshine. A mix of banished survival city building, but with elements from Anno's progression, and a grand strategy element with a world map. This takes the survival city builder and puts it on a global scale with rivals, and you can play against the AI or in multiplayer. Build up from a small village, harvesting natural resources and surviving harsh weather, to expand into the world and to interact with other nations. There isn't military in the traditional sense, but you can build up influence to take over land. There's also a bit of a randomization mechanic in the form of cards that control how fast you can progress, and also your choices are from a randomized pool, which some like, but others aren't a fan of as they want more direct control over their decisions. Made by a solo dev, refinement, progression, and scope does have its limits, and everything is subject to change. But in its current state, it's already feeling very promising, and with a year or two longer, if the updates keep coming, this could be a game that many city building enthusiasts are going to be into. Entering early access towards the end of 2020, Kingdoms Reborn is trying to finish by 2022. Continuing to survive, it's Timberborn by Mechanistry. Beaver Banished. That sounds like a really weird idea, but it's basically a survival colony city builder akin to the subgenre defining game, Banished. But your people are actually beavers. Besides surviving and fulfilling the needs of your beavers, the unique thing here is vertical construction. You can build things on top of things on top of things, and it's surprisingly intuitive and easy to do. The main concern is that the beaver thing is just a gimmick, and this ends up as a run-of-the-mill banished clone with just some stacking. Timberborn needs a lot of personality built into it, along with some gameplay innovations to keep it interesting, so we'll see how it develops over the next year, with early access meaning to start at the end of 2020. And then we have a bunch of roguelite city builders, starting with Against the Storm by Eremite Games. Here's a survival roguelite city builder where you're constantly trying to stay alive while satisfying the demands of a monarch. 3 races live in your colony, each with slightly different needs, preferences, and ability to work. And if any faction gets too unhappy, they start leaving, or they could just die. Pick a loadout of blueprints to start and cut through trees to uncover treasure or unleash dangers as your population and needs grow, all while you're racing against the clock where you have to reach a certain level of success before the monarch loses patience and thus you lose the game. From a 2020 demo, this was a pretty interesting game to play, and the idea of a roguelite city builder is something that should pique some people's interest. Content was rather lacking, and the game was way too easy in the demo though, so I'm hoping it gets a ton of new stuff and gets way more punishing to really make Against the Storm feel brutal but rewarding for its 2021 target release date. For more roguelite city building, we've got Dice Legacy by DESTINYbit. Now, this is a city builder that looks just different from anything else because it's set on a ring world. Roll, lock, die. That's the gameplay loop, and you gather resources to build your city while rolling dice to give you the abilities you need to survive against attacks. You can upgrade your dice's strength by reforging them too. I know some aren't going to enjoy the randomized elements with the dice, but it all adds to this being a unique entry in the list, and it is another roguelite survival city builder, which is a subgenre that's getting a lot of attention right now. This does also risk being too gimmicky though, and the whole loop of dying and trying again can be frustrating, so it's gonna be a balancing act here. Entering early access in 2021, a full release is meant to be within a year, meaning Dice Legacy should be completed by 2022 latest unless the devs get a bad roll. And then there's Kainga by Keen Bean Studios. This might sound like a weird one. It's a roguelite builder with strategy elements that seem to be inspired by Populous. Describing itself as an ancient fantasy builder where environments affect your culture, technology, and strategy, gameplay is all about adaptation and adjusting to new challenges. Those being disasters, massive beasts, or rival tribes. Designed for replayability, every time you play through the game, you'll end up with a different kind of tribe based on your surroundings and circumstances, which is nice for the longevity of the game if it really is that different each time. Visually, it looks a bit basic, but overall for a solo dev project, it's showing potential, and might be something just a little bit different from the rest in this list. Planning to enter early access at the end of 2020, Kainga is building towards a late 2021 full release, but as with most indie and solo dev projects, it usually runs a bit longer than expected, so we'll see how it goes over the next year. For one more city building game with roguelite elements, it's The Wandering Village by Fawn Studio. Build a village on the back of a giant creature, farm crops, send out missions, build a relationship with your giant to influence its actions, and survive the different biomes and elements in ecological and biological inspired gameplay. A city building simulation survival game with some roguelite elements, this announcement caught many by surprise, as it's just something really unexpected. Launching a Kickstarter towards the end of 2020 with a $35,000 goal, it hit its target within 24 hours, so interest is pretty high. It looks different with its hand-drawn animated art style, and gameplay seems unique, but as it's just getting started at the time of making this video, we're gonna have some time of watching The Wandering Village before it's finished, I'm sure. And then into historical city builders, kicking off with Nebuchadnezzar by Nepos Games. Classic isometric city building, clearly inspired by the old Impressions games, this one brings us to ancient Mesopotamia to plow fields, set up resource production chains, and erecting massive monuments. The campaign will have 16 missions set around specific events in history, from the colonization of ancient lands to the conquest of Babylon by the Persians. Also, the monuments are customizable, which is a fun addition, but hopefully it doesn't overcomplicate the endeavor and doesn't just feel superficial. Modding is also a thing that's promised. Overall, it looks great, and visually not bad, but new city builders inspired by Impressions titles haven't had the best of luck in recent years, and it's hard to live up to what we already have. Though maybe with the Pharaoh remake, it's more in vogue. So we'll see if Nebuchadnezzar will stand on the shoulder of giants or still be looking up at them. In a similar vein, it's Sumerians by Decumanus Games. Also set in ancient Mesopotamia and inspired by the history of the 3rd millennium BC. Begin with a small settlement near a river and grow into ancient megacities. Attract new citizens to your historical city by expanding irrigation systems, building temples and ziggurats, and building walls for defense. There's also management of production, workers, and trade. Overall, the basics seem fine for this one, but gameplay might be a little bland along with the visuals that seem to be lacking some personality and texture. Entering early access first, there is still time to develop the game into something much deeper in aesthetic and gameplay, but we'll have to see how the developers progress Sumerians through these early ages. And of course, there are Egyptian-themed city builders. First up is Dynasty of the Sands by Flair Studios. Ancient Egyptian city builders certainly are popular right now, as there are many trying to recapture the magic of the old Pharaoh and Children of the Nile. This one looks pretty good visually and is about survival, expansion, and creativity, as you'll be building a paradise along the Nile by managing your people, building everlasting monuments, and appeasing the gods. The environment is also dynamic with weather, wildlife, a day-night cycle, and more changing systems to make the world feel more alive. What sets this apart from other Egyptian city builders in development is that it's a bit more mythological, where fantasy elements and themes play a bigger role in the aesthetic and gameplay. That might be what you prefer or not, but it's a new option, so if you like the look of Dynasty of the Sands, then keep an eye on it, though no release window has been specified yet. Staying in Egypt, we've got Akhenaten, Rule as Pharaoh by Dotware Games. Here's an upcoming Egyptian city builder that's been in view for a couple years now, but development has been slow and very little revealed. More recently, it got a Steam page and it showed off a tiny bit of gameplay that's recorded off a phone, I think. So I'm gonna let you know about it, but I wouldn't hold my breath when it comes to this one, because as development progress and documentation goes, this one is really lacking in showing off the game. Akhenaten Rule as Pharaoh might eventually be something good, but with all the competition, it's got a lot of work to do if it really wants to stand out from the pack. Next, we've got a series of Builders games. First one, of course, in Egypt with Builders of Egypt by Strategy Labs. Historical city builders are definitely making a comeback, and Egypt is always a favorite setting. Builders of Egypt plays a lot like the old Caesar 4 from 2006, and there was a free demo through its development in 2020, which felt okay but lacking in content and refinement. It's got the expected evolution of houses, harvesting resources, manufacturing goods, and trade, but there was something missing when it came to personality and character. So my worry is that it'll be a bit generic unless a lot more style is injected into the game. It has gotten quite a positive reception so far though, so maybe people are gonna be into it. Looking at an early 2021 release, hopefully Builders of Egypt does flesh out and become something enjoyable for the year. Continuing the Builders of series, we have Builders of Greece by CreativeForge Games and Strategy Labs. From Egypt, we go to ancient Greece with a similar premise. Build cities, manage resources, erect monuments, establish trade routes, keep the gods happy, fulfill citizens' needs, and also deal with politics, allies, and enemies. What we've seen so far is generally nice looking, but not too much gameplay has really been shown off. Two games being developed at the same time by the same developers, Strategy Labs, sounds like they might be biting off more than they can chew, but time will tell if Builders of Greece can become something great by the Q4 2021 release target, or if they're just splitting their efforts between two games. And not just that, we've got one more Builders of game on the way. Last in the Builders series, it's Builders of China by Live Motion Games. Yes, one more Builders of game, and this one's set in China, with a similar idea, visual quality, and gameplay fundamentals. You know what this one's going to be like by now, but maybe you're more a fan of the Orient. This one is focusing on unique challenges in each region, internal politics within the kingdom, and dealing with the Emperor's will. These three Builders games are all being in development at the same time does feel kind of suspicious and a kind of all-in strategy that may or may not work. So I'm really not sure if these three games are going to turn out good. The only reason why I have any feeling that all of this could turn out into decent games is that the fact that they do actually have different dev team names at least, and a handful of publisher names involved, but I'm not entirely sure how everything's set up in the back end. And since Builders of Egypt garnered quite a bit of positive attention, maybe the series will as well. We'll just have to wait and see how the series develops over the next year or so, and if Builders of China will learn from the first two games, as it should be the third one to release, or if they all just trip into the same pitfalls. Out of that series, but back into Greece, we've got Pelagos Rise of Greece by Cerberus. This is a city-building game with RTS elements set in ancient Greece, and the stated goal is to recreate old-school gaming, but modernized. Promising a procedural campaign, complex economy, naval and ground combat, along with modular fortifications, the outline of the game sounds nice, and the graphics aren't too shabby either, based on what they've shown off. Having said that, we haven't really seen all that much, and there's a lot more development that needs to be done. Aiming for a 2021 to 2022 release, it's going to be a while before we can fully play Pelagos Rise of Greece, so we'll just keep an eye on it for now. And then for one that we've been watching for a few years now, it's Neolithic by Alex T. Harvey. Ancient civilization building and survival with city building and RTS elements. Set from the Neolithic to the late Bronze Age, your village will need to grow in a harsh world, and you have to fulfill your villagers' needs. Those villagers will also gain skills and inherit traits as they craft, build, and organize. The RTS aspects also show individual unit control, resource harvesting, and military that's kind of like Age of Empires, but keep in mind every unit is a character with their own stats and skills. It overall looks like a hybrid of a lot of things, which can be really cool, but the challenge there is to make sure it's not just a jumble of mechanics, and it does all come together into a single vision. This is a solo project, meaning development is really slow, but notably a 2020 update did show the game being pretty much in a playable state right now, and it should be improving through 2021, where we'll see where Neolithic ends up. For one more that we've been watching for a couple years, it's Ymir by TheJunt. A city-building grand strategy MMO with pig people that we've been listing for years and development is going really slow. At first glance it might look like an impression city builder, but it plays very differently and there are persistent servers with world maps and many other players running their own cities and empires. Complex economics, resource management, cultural and political progression, military conquest, and so much more adds a lot of depth and can be very overwhelming and confusing for newer players. So it's not super easy to get into. Updates are constant though, hotfixes non-stop, and a content update every so often, so development marches forward, but it's a solo indie dev, so it's going to plod along for a long time. Being in early access on Steam with mostly positive reviews means people are still really liking Ymir, and the servers are running, so it's playable now. Moving further from history and more into fantasy, we're getting to Songs of Six by Gamatron AB. A fantasy city builder starting in a small colony with little impact but grow into a metropolis and empire through building, scheming, along with military combat. You are in a living world filled with different races, creatures, environments, weather, disasters, and enemies. Huge scale, base building, grand strategy, tactical battles, and a ton of complexity are what this game is about. Gameplay sounds amazing, meanwhile visually it's pixel art with a lot of detail, which is nice. And the deep lore and expansive scope of the game is going to be great if it all is actually developed. With a successful Kickstarter in 2020 and entering early access, Songs of Six is on its way in development now, though a final release date is not confirmed, so it's probably going to be in early access for a while. Continuing through a fantasy world, we've got Distant Kingdoms by Orthra Studios. Meaning to blend city building, social management, exploration, and adventure gameplay, here we have a fantasy world where you build a network of towns while providing for your people with production lines. Those people being humans, elves, dwarves, and orcs, ranging from peasants to nobles. Adventuring is modeled after tabletop RPGs with a choose-your-own-adventure system. And gameplay is promised to be easy for beginners, but having enough depth for veterans. Everything is moddable too. Besides all that, almost no new information was revealed through 2020, and at the time of making this video, the last we heard was maybe a 2020 release. But we're close to the end, so unless they plan to surprise everyone, then I'm going to expect Distant Kingdoms to release a little bit later. Moving into something that seems a little bit crazier, it's Dream Engines Nomad Cities by Suncrash. Survival city building with floating cities. It sounds ridiculous, but it's kind of like They Are Billions, but to escape the horde, you load up and take off your entire city and move to another location. Build, automate production, and survive against nightmarish creatures. The choices you can make sound important, from what permanent and disposable structures to build, to when and where you should make a stand or run away. Weight and fuel supply are big factors, so mismanage those and it's your doom. It's a little wacky, and that's one of its selling points, and you'll probably know if you're gonna be into this pretty quickly after having seen some footage. Hopefully it's not all theme and it does actually have enough content though. Alpha is meant to be starting around the end of 2020, and I expect it to go through early access development on Steam through 2021. A final release for Dream Engines Nomad Cities hopefully is more of a reality over the next couple years. Speaking of mobile cities, we have Flotsam by Pajama Llama Games. A floating garbage town survival builder. The premise of building a city on a water world is captivating, and there's going to be a lot of scavenging, recycling, and sailing your whole town around. It's got a colorful and cartoony art style and is a feel-good post-apocalyptic world, which is a contrast for sure. Originally trying to float around a 2020 release window, it seems things didn't flow their way. Plus, it can be a good few months between updates, which doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, as one of the main issues right now is a lack of content and depth. Though reviews are still mostly positive on Steam, so people are still enjoying it. It's been in early access since 2019, but for a full experience you might want to wait. If development picks up, Flotsam might be able to hit a 2021 release date, but we'll just have to see how it goes. For something a bit more freeform, we have Foundation by Polymorph Games. Organic building from where houses get placed to total customization of larger structures and monuments. Full modding support is also supposed to be a part of things. This is a game that's been showing a lot of promise for quite some time, but has always felt just a little, or maybe a bit more, underdeveloped. Having tried the game a few times over the years, it's always frustrating that it isn't complete because the foundation of the game is really good, and you're just left wanting more. That's generally a good thing, but if the wait gets too long without big updates, then it's easy to lose interest. Entering early access on Steam in 2019, this was meant to fully release in 2020, but it's taking a bit longer than expected. Recent updates are good, showing off new animations, gameplay features, and a much-needed UI overhaul, so it seems like things are going relatively briskly now, and I'm hoping Foundation is a bit more than just a foundation in 2021. Then we've got one that looks kinda rough, but I'm gonna let you know about it anyway. It's called Sugar Winds by Atlantis Code. This is an indie-looking Caribbean colony builder where you load up your ship in Europe and set sail for the new world. Create a city, trade, and fend off pirates in sea and land combat. Promising over 50 buildings and 80 production lines, there should be plenty of options for growth and design of your city, but more buildings doesn't always mean more depth to the gameplay. The whole game looks really unfinished in the free demo, so that might turn you away already. But if it manages to get some good mechanics and some charm into the game, then this could still be nice. Maybe. It's sailing towards a 2021 release, so if you like the idea of it, then go ahead and check out Sugar Winds and you can decide for yourself. It's now time to get to work in Workers and Resources, Soviet Republic by 3 Division. A Soviet-themed city-building tycoon game where you'll be constructing your own republic and attempting to transform a poor country into an industrial superpower. Create industrial complexes, set up infrastructure, keep your people happy enough, send your citizens to the mines, and trade resources in an authentic 60s to 90s world. It's certainly something different in the city-building genre. With a ton of very positive reviews on Steam, this has been received extremely well since opening up gameplay to the public. Early access is supposed to end in 2021 for a completed game, and the roadmap doesn't have a huge amount of things not currently being worked on. So perhaps Workers and Resources Soviet Republic will be able to finish the job within that planned window, unless work was disrupted a bit too much in 2020. For a proper post-apocalyptic world, we've got Endzone, A World Apart by Gently Mad Studios. Looking very much like the next game on this list, this is a post-apocalyptic survival city builder where you are rebooting civilization after global nuclear disaster. Build a new home in a shattered world where radiation, toxic rain, disastrous weather, and more threaten your survival. Gather and refine resources, send out expeditions into the world, and progress from fulfilling basic needs to providing luxuries. As survival city builders go, this one is looking pretty solid, and a lot of people seem to be liking it. There's a loose plan for a full release in 2021, and there is a roadmap, though the door is open for a longer dev time depending on how early access goes. And with very positive reviews on Steam right now, it's probably safe to jump into Endzone, A World Apart right now if you like what you see. Looking kinda like the last game on the list, it's Surviving the Aftermath by Iceflake Studios. Clearly competition. The world has ended and you must now build a colony to not just survive, but to thrive. Natural disasters, wildlife, extreme weather, sickness, and the outside world all threaten you and your people. After setting up the basics, you can build a gate opening your home to the world that you can explore and scavenge in, but must also defend against bandits and other threats. It's all pretty interesting and plays decently for a survival city builder, and the world map stuff helps add another layer of gameplay, which is nice. Being an Epic Store exclusive in early access, there was some pretty janky stuff at the start, but over the last year, there's been consistent big updates and content additions, so it's really fleshing out now. But it's coming to early access on Steam now as well. Initially trying to make it to a 2020 release date, development was slowed, and they're now promising a 1.0 full release, including on Steam in early 2021. Considering all the post-apocalyptic worlds, maybe we should just leave the planet in Seed by Clang Games. Simulating the future of humanity. This is a city-building MMO about settling exoplanets. Start with the basics needed for your colony to survive and build up to societal complexity and large-scale production. Players are meant to interact with each other in multiplayer, generating their own experiences as they group together, collaborate, or compete. Conceptually, this has a lot of thought behind it and has amazing ideas, but ideas alone aren't going to make a great game. It was announced a few years ago, and there still isn't all that much revealed or playable, though there is a Pioneers program set up for first players. Seed sounds amazing, but since it's taking a while, don't get too hyped for now, and maybe just check in with it a bit later when there might be more to see. Now for the final main entry, but remember there's almost 20 bonus games after this, so keep watching. Industries of Titan by Brace Yourself Games. A sci-fi city builder set on the moon Titan, where you try to appease corporate masters while competing with rival corporations. Plus, there's ship-to-ship combat that's like FTL. It's a lot, and kind of weird, but it's an interesting take on the genre. It's also from the creators of Crypto the Necrodancer, a very different game, but it does mean the music is pretty awesome. Starting in early access as an Epic Store exclusive, it had a bit of a rocky start with a lot of features missing and a big roadmap for development. Through 2020, there have been a number of big updates, adding in a lot of the promised features, but there's still more on the way. Hopefully, that rough beginning is not a reflection of how the game will be on release, and it'll be having a full release on Steam in 2021. And it should be getting a full release on Steam in 2021 as well. If all the promised features get implemented, Industries of Titan could be something unique and compelling to play. Alright, now for a bunch of bonus games, but if you made it this far, you probably enjoyed your time here, and it would be greatly appreciated if you could like, subscribe, share this video, and ring that bell, as it really does help keep this channel running. Head over to gamersack.com/listhub to vote on your favorite game from the list, and for bonus stuff. Also, you can support more directly by using the Humble Bundle referral link to buy games, perusing my gaming merch store where I design my own products, or checking out the Patreon or Subscribestar to really help keep the lights on. All linked down below, along with the Discord community, Twitch live streams, and social media accounts where I'm active and contactable. Now for those bonus games. If you haven't heard, there's really good news for the old Impression city builders. Caesar 3 has been improving through an open source port called Julius, and it's getting modded with a project called Augustus. There are now roadblocks in Caesar 3. And Pharaoh has gotten an officially licensed remaster, rebuilding the game on an entirely new engine. Then I want to mention Manor Lords. I know many of you here will be asking for it, but after discussing with the developer on what kind of game it is, it's more of a strategy game with city building elements. So to avoid listing the same game twice across lists, the main entry of Manor Lords is going to be in the strategy list. We've been watching Ancient Cities for years, and it was meant to release years ago, and they keep delaying, so it's still going, but who knows when it'll release, but beta access started in 2020. Roman's Age of Caesar by Firefly Studios, the creators of Stronghold. This is a city building MMO that's kind of like Caesar 2, but feels a bit like a mobile game, but it is on PC as well. But also development is still ongoing and things changing. Aztec Empire by Growing Seeds. This was an Impression-styled, walker-based city builder that unfortunately didn't hit its Kickstarter goal. Development might continue, but it will be slow. And now there are 3 listings of upcoming city building games that at first glance seem kind of generic, but I'm gonna make a note of them here for now. There's Chinese City Constructor, Aztec Empire, a different one by Playway, but it's got the same name, and a Viking city builder. You can have a look at them and make of it what you will. Ostriv. This was listed a few times before, and it's been in development since 2014, and it's still in alpha, so there's no telling when it'll release. Last year I listed a game called Build. It's now called Super Build, and it was supposed to fully release in 2020, and many considered it more of a sandbox game than a city builder. Townscaper. More of a toy rather than a full-on city building game. This blew up and is super popular and plays kind of like Lego. People are really enjoying the Zen experience of placing down blocks, so check it out. For a small one, we've got Microtown. I listed this before and it was supposed to release in 2020, but seems like the scope of the game has been expanded and now it's unclear how long it's gonna take to finish. We also have Metropolisim. This was something I listed last year and it looked promising, but there have been no dev updates for a year, so maybe it's no longer continuing. There is Citybound. This is more of a tech demo right now, but it's got a lot of potential with its systems. But until it's more of a game, I think I'll avoid listing it in the main list for now. For a rough-looking indie one, we've got Atmos City. It's a small indie game that's coming along slowly where you're building a city in the sky. And speaking of floating cities, Airborne Kingdom, something I listed last year, it's supposed to release right at the end of 2020, so it should be out by now, unless something changed and it got delayed, but that's why it's not in the main list. And floating but back down on water, kind of like Flotsam, we have Buoyancy, a small indie game set on a water world that's supposed to release and leave early access in 2020 as well. And finally, Atomic Society. This is basically finished now, but needing one last big update to hit 1.0. And that will probably release in 2020 unless it takes a little bit longer. And that's 30 upcoming city builders that should be releasing through 2021 and some into 2022 depending on their development. Which ones are you most interested in? Oh, so here's something I'd like to know. Do you think it's great that city building games have diversified into all kinds of subgenres? Or do none of the new ideas interest you and you just want the old stuff but better? I kinda like the innovations, but it is really hard to beat the classics though, isn't it? Meanwhile, if you'd like to see more city building content, check out my Impressions Games playthroughs of Caesar, Pharaoh, Zeus, and Emperor, along with plenty more city building, strategy, and simulation content right here on the channel. Or stay in the know and drop by the other upcoming games list videos for many more games. Alright, that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching, hope you enjoyed it and found it useful, and I'll see you in the next video.